Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. The Road to Autonomy is brought to you in part by Stantec Generation AV. Stantec Generation AV combines some of the most experienced AV experts in the industry with the resources of a global engineering firm. Stantec Generation AV provides education, consulting, assessment, and guidance to any industry interested in autonomous vehicles. Learn more at stantec.com. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Russ Mitchell from the LA Times. Russ, welcome back to the podcast. This is your third time on here, and every conversation's been super interesting and fascinating, and I can't wait to see where today leads us.
Same here. I'm happy to be here.
We've covered a lot in the past different topics around the business of self-driving, California's electrification push, and I want to start with electrification. It seems you put the word electric vehicle in a company, you take it public. It reminds me of blockchain years ago. The stock goes one way up, which raises the question, are we in the midst of an electric vehicle bubble?
Well, first of all, I think we're in the midst of a stock market bubble and asset bubbles all over the place. Yes, we're in an EV bubble, but that's part of a greater stock market bubble. It's especially prominent in the EV area, where if you look at traditional ways of valuing companies, there's no way that even the leaders in these companies, I shouldn't say no way, but it's very difficult to imagine that any of these companies can make enough profit and cash flow in order to justify their value. However, we're in a stock flow, not a stock fundamentals market. People make money when other people buy stocks, and they keep pushing it higher and higher and higher. I saw this on a more limited but still crazy level in the dot-com boom. That didn't end well, and I don't think that this is going to end well either. We'll have to see what happens with inflation and Fed policy and such. But there's no question there's a stock market bubble, and within that, an even greater, I think, EV market bubble.
Inflation's no longer transitory. We've heard that recently. We've known that as a consumer. And I remember the old days when cash flow and PE mattered. Okay, can this company actually have massive amounts of cash flow to service a dividend and grow the business? And now that goes out the wayside. And staying on the EV theme, you look at the market, EV charging, that seems like that's another bubble. There's really no standardization around it. It's very inconvenient for a consumer. If you're driving, say, from San Francisco to San Diego, you might have to download an Electrify America app, a ChargePoint app, a Blink app to get there, and that's very inconvenient. Do we see a consolidation coming to the EV charging market at some point?
I would say absolutely. I can't predict the future, but that's what my gut tells me, and what limited facts on hand and limited brain power tell me. Nobody knows anything really about the future, but I'd have to say that there's definitely a bubble in that market too. These companies, it's hard to see when you look at their business models how they'll make enough money to justify their share prices. Some would say it's hard to see how they'll make money at all. That's one reason that the government is subsidizing these and why the industry is begging for subsidies. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not against electric cars. I have one. I'm not against charging. I think it's all great stuff. But when it comes to profits and then stock prices and stock values, I think we're living through crazy land.
We're in crazy times. I remember years and years ago when we first had the world's first $1 trillion company. It was Saudi Aramco, the oil arm of Saudi Arabia. First $1 trillion company. We'll never get a $1 trillion company. Now we have $2 trillion companies. And Apple, the way it's going, and all the analysts are predicting this, that we're going to get the world's first $3 trillion company. Apple's making a lot of money. I'll put it to you very simply and bluntly. They've got a license to print money. That thing is a cash machine. It's absolutely incredible. And then on the other hand, you have companies that are growing at a rapid pace that don't have the Apple's cash machine. Let's look at Tesla for a minute. Tesla's returned over 300% in 2021. That's an incredible rate of return without the Apple cash machine. When does that valuation start to say, wait a second, something has to change here?
Well, first I'll mention a half serious idea, and then I'll get more serious. Elon Musk was named Times Person of the Year and put on the cover. I saw on Twitter somebody posted a stock analyst's viewpoint from 2017. He was saying, yes, stay in Tesla stock. The time to sell is when Elon Musk becomes Times Person of the Year. So we'll see. Elon Musk is selling. There are a lot of people, institutions, individuals that are not seeing that as a cue. They continue to prop up the stock, and it's still trading at crazy values. My wife last night asked me why we didn't buy Tesla stock. People that haven't bought Tesla stock are asking them the same questions. I'm not allowed to buy Tesla stock because I cover it for the LA Times. In one way, I'm very surprised at the value. On the other hand, when you look at the cult of personality around Elon Musk and his constant moving of goalposts and his visions of the future have, to me, bamboozled a lot of people. I would not say short the stock. I'm not going to give any advice on Tesla stock at all, but it is one of the most grossly overvalued companies I've ever seen in my life based on fundamentals, because the fundamentals aren't strong. They barely make money. The thing started just after the turn of the millennium, and they barely make money, and their money, most of the money they make comes from trading emissions credits, accounting for sales of full self-driving, which isn't really full self-driving. That's where their money comes from right now. I'm not anti-Tesla by any means. I think it's great to have a successful electric car company out there, however you measure success, and market share has got to be one measure. But they do have the Model S, the Model X, the Model Y, and the Model 3, and that's it. There's no semi-truck that was promised. There's no Cybertruck yet. Musk is having problems in Germany with his plant. It's just hard to imagine a scenario where any kind of fundamentals can justify the level of the stock. But again, that's not the world we're in. You know, people could consider that an old-fashioned look. The thing is that at some point, if it's pure momentum and there's no financial fundamentals behind it, it's got to end someday. When that is, I don't know.
And when it ends, you no longer want to be on the dance floor. Hopefully you took some chips off the table. And I want to put in the growth into perspective. Since January 1st, 2021 through December 9th, Tesla has contributed 71 points to the S&P 500. I repeat, 71 points. That's a lot of points. The S&P 500 historically is known for large cap companies, IBM, Cisco. They can just consistently grow year over year, 6% return, 5% return, nothing fancy, nothing sexy. And then this comes along and completely changes the game. I do want to point out that I have to give Elon a lot of credit for making electric vehicles cool, getting the public's interest.
Sure, absolutely.
It's incredible because we need electric vehicles. They are the future. That, and I think he's done a really great job of building out the charging infrastructure network. Those, to me, are the two things that Tesla stands out. The one that concerns me from this perspective is the naming of full self-driving and autopilot.
Yes.
It's confusing. What happened if, let's go in the Wayback Machine, if Tesla never called it full self-drive and just called it an assistance system or something that was not indicative that this car could actually drive of itself? Would Tesla be as polarized today as it is if the proper statements were made early on in the development of the technology?
Well, first, let me say that polarization works for Elon Musk. And to repeat what you said, full credit for making electric cars desirable to a significant share of the market, because they weren't before Tesla. Although it's very expensive, full credit for getting the chargers out there to help seed the market. Absolutely. But when it comes to things like autopilot and full self-driving, autopilot is not autopilot as most people think of it. But a lot of people think that autopilot allows the car to drive itself. And there's been death and carnage as a result. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is looking into this. But Musk got away with that. If your goal is to make yourself the richest person in the world, never mind safety, hats off to him. Now, in full self-driving, he's doubled down. And he's calling something full self-driving that is absolutely not, at this point, full self-driving. So he's out there, unlike companies like Waymo, Zoox, Argo AI, Aurora, Cruise, and several others, many others. He is charging his customers for his test software and has deployed it on public roads. And they're testing level 4, level 5 vehicles on public roads. And so far, regulators are allowing them to do that.
Really interesting article in the December 11th edition of the LA Times. And you wrote about State Senator Lena Gonzalez, who's the California Senate Transportation Chair of the committee. She wrote a letter questioning the California DMV's approval to allow Tesla's full self-driving, commonly known as FSD, on public roads. Could you talk about that article and what is the current status of that letter? Did it go anywhere? Did it fall on deaf ears? Or where does that stand?
Well, it remains to be seen whether it's fallen on deaf ears or not. Just to clarify slightly, she was questioning the safety record of full self-driving in that letter, implicitly questioning their designation of, the levels. The story, basically for people who aren't, or even people in California that don't know, the State Department of Motor Vehicles, under a law passed in 2012, issues permits to driverless companies that are testing on public roads. They don't cover level 2. There's no permit necessary for, level 2 like Autopilot or Ford's Blue Cruise or General Motors Super Cruise, where people are expected to pay attention at all times. According to the DMV, full self-driving is a level 2 car, even though if you look at what that means by various definitions or by the specific definition that the industry uses, intent is a serious part of that. So if you intend to make it level 4, then the regulations that the DMV is basing its own regulations are, or I should say the framework that DMV is, I'm getting a little in the weeds here. Sorry, I'll get out of the weeds real quick. Their regulations on say that if a car is intended to be level 4, then it qualifies as a level 4 car. When I've asked the DMV what basis they use to assess level 2, they really didn't have a clear answer. And my interpretation is that it was because Tesla told us it is. I've tried repeatedly for months and months and months to get an interview with the head of the Department of Motor Vehicles, Steve Gordon. He just doesn't want to talk publicly about this. He hasn't talked publicly about this at all. I'm looking for clarification on what's a complicated issue, on a safety issue that affects public roads. And now the legislature is starting to pay attention. And Lena Gonzalez, very smart, savvy woman from Southern California, who is a relatively new chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. This is what my story was about. Sent a letter to Gordon asking what's up with Tesla and the DMV and asking how the DMV is monitoring the safety of full self-driving on public roads, what kind of data it has. The DMV has told me that they have received the note and it's under the letter and it's under review.
And I want to highlight a sentence that State Senator Gonzalez put in the letter. And this is quote unquote, "The public deserves more info on this AV tech so we can ensure safety is a priority as innovation evolves. I look forward to this response." That's very level. There's no insinuatory stuff there. But I have to ask, so we talk about the levels, and level 2 is ADAS. You have to be fully engaged at all times. Level 4, as you talked about with Argo, Zoox, and Cruise, and Waymo, that is a level 4 system. The Tesla is a level 2 system under the technical definition. That raises the question, does the DMV even have the legal authority to impose regulations on FSD, since it's technically an advanced driver assistance system and not a self-driving car? Despite the marketing spin, the marketing hype, and this car can drive anywhere, the promo videos?
Well, let me ask, what makes you think it's technically a level 2 system?
Technically, it's a level 2 system because you have to be engaged at all times.
Doesn't a test driver for an early version of a Waymo autonomous vehicle have to pay attention at all times?
Yes.
So wasn't that a level 2 vehicle? Did Waymo have to report to the DMV?
Well, Waymo is testing the vehicle and under safe conditions and not cutting corners. The thing that concerns me about the FSD, you see these YouTube videos of people doing stupid acts of things. There was one video that the mother filmed it when the child slept in the back of the vehicle.
Right.
That could lead to manslaughter.
The mother in the passenger seat, I may add.
Yes. Why did the Child Protective Services or some California state agency knock on that door and say, "Ma'am, that you've put the child in danger"? Because somebody has to set an example. This stuff. It's not, the full self-driving is not a toy. It is a weapon.
Right.
If it's used incorrectly.
I've lived in California for more than 30 years. I love the state. I love living here. But you could say, why didn't the California agency do blank name any number of California agencies, and we could be asking questions all day. The California government, not every agency, but many of the agencies tend to be arrogant and unwilling to really explain to the public why they make the decisions they make. And the DMV is close to the top of that list.
I'll throw another agency in there, the California Public Utilities Commission.
Yeah, same.
So you look at all this stuff in the California. How did the California Public Utilities Commission even become regulating self-driving cars for charging? I thought they were supposed to regulate the utilities. How did they get into regulating who can charge fares in a self-driving car?
Well, somewhere along the line, and I don't know where, the limousine services were considered a public utility. Go figure. The PUC, Public Utilities Commission, took or was given the duties of regulating that industry. They extended that into Uber and Lyft and other ride-hailing services. So that comes under the PUC. So now they're saying that if you charge for autonomous drive services, the fare regulation comes under their authority, and they can use various measures to determine whether their fare structure makes sense, including issues like safety. So you got the DMV, which has never had a history of regulating safety, in charge of autonomous safety, and you've got the PUC in charge of safety to some degree.
It just seems just bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy.
Welcome to California. Again, I love the state. I don't want to get into my own personal politics, but I like living in a place that's very diverse, very open, very eager, not tolerant, but eager to mix it up with lots of different kinds of people. It's a beautiful place. I love it. The government has a lot of problems.
All you have to do, and without getting political, is just look at the amount of companies that are leaving and the amount of jobs that are shipping out of the state.
Yeah.
And you look at where it ranks 50 out of 50 for business climate at the bottom. Then there's this obsession in the self-driving car industry around San Francisco. Must deploy in San Francisco, must deploy in San Francisco. And Cruise is going through the process now for the California Public Utilities Commission being able to charge. Well, lo and behold, another agency pops their head up, the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, says, nope, we're going to oppose this. They send a 24-page letter to the California Public Utilities Commission. In that letter, they stated the following to oppose it. Promotional videos from the General Motors Company unit show Cruise passengers illegally hopping in and out of vehicles in the middle of the street instead of the curb. Taxis do that all the time. Uber and Lyft drivers do that all the time. Was this basically they're trying to protect their turf, or what's going on with that?
I wish I could help you. There are legitimate reasons for many of these agencies to want to be players in this. And if in the future there are problems and the agency wasn't paying attention, then the agency's in the hot seat. So in a sense, you can understand bureaucracies trying to protect themselves. The bigger problem I see, beyond what any detailed issues come up with any particular agency, is that there's no coordination in California. The problem is you have overlapping layers of bureaucracy on this issue and inconsistent application of whatever the multiples of regulations are. You've got the DMV giving Tesla a break at the expense of everybody else that's playing by their rules. The DMV is not coordinating with the PUC by any indication. The same with the local agencies. So California is at the same time, in my mind, making it difficult for the development of these vehicles, and at the same time being inconsistent about the application of their own laws. Because of the way California has been approaching this, it's failing in its mission.
It's 100% failing in its mission. We have to address public safety, and we have to address public trust. In my opinion, the best way for us to address safety, the best way for us to address trust, is either to educate the public around what is autonomy and what is ADAS. And it takes one tweet from Elon to say, Tesla's not a self-driving car. Please operate this carefully and pay attention at all time. Mm-hmm. We need a game-changing, monumental moment like that. I know it won't happen, but that's what we need.
But how could he possibly send a tweet like that when he's been selling a $10,000 option that's called full self-driving?
Because it's the right thing to do by society.
Ah. Elon Musk, the right thing to do by society. Okay.
I know I'm not going to win that argument, but it's what should happen.
It is. You look at what's happening in Silicon Valley with companies like Facebook. I've been covering technology almost my entire career, which is quite a while. I'm a proponent of innovation and the advancement of technology. I've been following Silicon Valley since the early days of, not the absolute early days, but I knew Andy Grove, I knew Scott McNeely, all these guys that Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. I had a one-on-one lunch with Steve Jobs in the early days. I mean, there was a lot of promise at the time. And you've got companies now such as Facebook or to some level Tesla that may be innovative in many ways, but seem to be working against society's best interests. The electric cars that Tesla does is pro-society, faking a product as full self-driving when it's not, only in the long run will hurt the development of autonomous vehicles, which hold out the promise of much greater safety, much more access to transportation for people with disabilities or old people. Yet he ends up as Times Person of the Year. So go figure.
You're right about the hurting aspect because it's confusing the public for what is, and that as from the autonomous vehicle industry, that's our big concern. I've been out at restaurants and events, and people tell me I have a self-driving car. No, you don't. Yes, I do. You don't understand. Yes, I do. I said, sir, ma'am, you do not. Yes, I do. But it's amazing that they believe this, and when you're very polite trying to say, no, ma'am, no, sir, they get very uppity. That's what I paid for.
Yeah. You're talking about Tesla Autopilot.
The Autopilot, does that raise the question of the Consumer Protection Bureau or some agencies saying this is misleading? This is misleading advertising. This is false advertising. Does something like that ever happen?
In previous decades, you would have expected something like that to happen. Now, I was about to speculate. I can't speculate on why the Federal Trade Commission, consumer protection agencies, the California Department of DMV are not taking this seriously. And frankly, I'm surprised that, I'm not totally surprised, but it's notable that the heads of the autonomous companies and the other automakers aren't speaking out more about this because they tell me off the record, not on the record, that it's hurting them. Yet they don't want to talk about it. And now, you got NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, as a result of Tesla's crashing into so many emergency vehicles, demanding that ADAS makers and AV makers submit some very detailed data on any significant crash that they have. And the Self-Driving Coalition is filing and lobbying to get those data requirements reduced. They wouldn't have had to deal with this, I don't think, if you didn't have a bad actor out there messing it up for them. Yet they're pretty much silent about it.
The industry, while it should come out, they tell you off the record, it is hurting them. We know for a fact it is hurting the industry. I don't see them coming out as shame as it is. But you have two individuals that could do it, that have, in my opinion, enough clout. There was a headline on Market Watch today and said, is Ford the new Tesla? Jim Farley could come out and make a statement. He's got so much political clout built up on the performance of that stock, the way Ford's performed. He could come out and say it. Mary Barr and the incredible job that she's done running GM, and she's done a wonderful job. She could come out and say it. Is it going to take one of those large traditional OEM makers to come out and do something since they are so respected?
It would add pressure. If you assume that regulators are looking the other way on something that they shouldn't be looking away from, if you make that assumption, then any powerful industry person that brought up the issue would help solve that problem.
And then imagine if that person is not viewed as a political person with an agenda. Mm-hmm. Then you might be able to get somewhere. But time will tell. I just hope that the individuals that subscribe to the beta test or use the software respect the true capabilities of what the vehicle is. And as you clearly stated, and I've clearly stated, it is not a self-driving car. We need more messaging around that, and I hope that the industry comes together to explain truly what is ADAS and what is self-driving. Going back to self-driving here, we talked about crashes. Pony AI got in a crash in Fremont, California on October 28th this year. They had their testing permit suspended. Was that the first time that there's been a crash in California for a test? Any insight from your world on why this happened or what the details are or what the process is going to look like?
I asked the DMV for details. They sent me one line that basically said that the crash happened and they revoked the permit. That's the full explanation. There are a few companies have permits to test totally driverless cars. Most of the companies are using test drivers, and they have permits for that. There are a few companies, including Pony AI, who have permits to test totally autonomous vehicles, which this was. Most of the hundreds of crashes that have occurred in test vehicles have been very minor, and they have tended to be rear-end collisions where the person behind the autonomous vehicle expected it to behave more like a human and bumped into the back, say at a right-hand turn at a traffic light. I believe the car went onto a median strip and I believe hit a pole. That's where a completely driverless car is leaving the road and having a collision. I'm also not surprised, and I don't know if there's a connection here, but since the DMV is getting more heat from the legislature, perhaps they feel that they need to show that they're being diligent on a Chinese-funded company.
They're trying to show diligence. You're a reporter. You're at a very credible, respected news outlet that writes some really great writing styles and does really great in-depth reporting. Why not be transparent with the LA Times? Say, this is what we know. This is what happened. Our officials would go on the record with you because that would, in my opinion, build trust.
Oh, absolutely. I talked to a former executive at the DMV just a few days ago, and I asked him that very question. Why don't they want to talk? And he said, because there's no way to logically explain what's happening there.
Okay, so why doesn't State Senator Gonzalez launch an investigation into the DMV to stop the nonsense?
Well, perhaps she will. I mean, her letter could be the beginning and the end of the legislature's interest in this, or it could be the first shot across the bow.
Something tells me, and this is pure speculation, there's a lot more going on in the DMV than just this, what's happening around autonomy. That's something they don't want out.
I don't know. It could be. I don't know.
You look at the mismanagement of the agencies, the California Public Utilities Commission, which is a black box into who knows where. You've got the California DMV that's completely mismanaged. If this shenanigans continues, do you see autonomous vehicle companies continuing to flock and flee California to greener pastures like Arizona and Texas and New Mexico?
Well, not really. And the reason is these companies are testing in various states, as you well know, and they're deploying in various states, as you well know. They are trying to negotiate the California process. Many of the companies are based here. It makes more sense to test here because a lot of the engineers are here. And you've got a base of potential customers that are innovation friendly, used to modern technology, particularly in the Bay Area and to a large degree in Los Angeles. They're not afraid of trying these cars out, at least at this point. In fact, they would consider it a badge of honor to be able to go to the next cocktail party in the Mission District in San Francisco and talk about their ride in the autonomous Cruise or Waymo car or whatever. So it's a very receptive area to this kind of technology. It serves their interest to test here because there's so much talent here for autonomous development.
Looking down, so we go down the coast here, looking at LA, Motional's preparing to test and eventually commercialize the service in Los Angeles. Will Los Angeles be the next area of the state that you see emerging as a home to this technology? Be the Bay Area and then Los Angeles?
Well, yeah, that'd be the logical next step, I think. Today in the news, Motional announced a partnership with Uber. So we'll have to see what happens there. Motional said they picked LA. I'm surprised that because LA has much better weather than the Bay Area, I'm surprised that more trials haven't begun there. Motional is partly doing Los Angeles because There is a real talent shortage for people who are really great at programming these kinds of cars with machine learning and other forms of expertise. They're actually looking to people who work in Hollywood and related industries and the game industries to try to pull some of that talent. Another reason they want to try in LA. I think if these things begin to take off, LA is a natural place for these companies to deploy.
Well, help them build trust. The Hollywood's there. The entire movie industry's there. Actors start showing up and they're photographed in and out of these vehicles. Public say, oh, my favorite actor was in that vehicle. I want to try that. I want to, and from an economic development standpoint, I want to go to LA to ride in the car that Leonardo DiCaprio rode in. There's thousands of people that will want to do that. It's a great way to build public trust.
Right. You should propose a marketing campaign.
Perhaps. Well, Motion will be tapping into the USC, UCLA talent pools. You've got these incredibly smart children there.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the California Institute of Technology, Caltech.
Caltech's phenomenal. I mean, just like with the rocket technology, that place it's a national treasure, in my opinion, the research and work that's been done there.
Yeah, and doesn't get the attention that places like MIT get. It should get more attention than it does.
Well, if they keep launching Mars rovers from their neighbor over at JPL, perhaps they will.
Yeah.
Russ, looking to the future, what does the autonomous vehicle industry in, say, 5 or 10 years from now look like in California?
In terms of deployment?
Just in terms of, is it a vibrant industry? Is it a healthy, growing industry? Are Californians, are they actively using the technology? How do you kind of see it evolving, or do you see the technology being developed there and then being shipped to, say, Las Vegas, where it's actually going to be deployed?
I think that most of these companies have picked out several places around the country and in some cases around the world for early deployment. Also looking, because of this talent shortage, looking for other places to set up engineering operations and R&D operations and such. So inevitably, there will be a dispersion of the industry. But the core of the industry is here, and I think it will remain a major player. As we talked about earlier, the acceptance of the population for new technologies is here. So I think we're going to see a fair number of deployments in California. We'll also have to keep an eye on, how it's regulated by the PUC and the DMV and all the local agencies to see how rapidly or not that happens.
2022 is right around the corner. We're a few days away. Any big changes that you see coming in the AV industry, or anything that you're looking forward to covering in 22?
The early deployments are going to be key. Argo's getting ready. Cruise is already sort of offering a service and getting some pushback. Waymo is already sort of offering a service in California. There's going to be more deployments starting next year and especially into 2023 and 2024. And seeing how those deployments play out will determine the near-term future of the industry.
And it's going to be really, really interesting to watch as we get there. And Russ, as we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them?
Oh, the idea that autonomous cars are, since that was the main focus of our conversation here, autonomous vehicles are coming. Most of the companies, there are some people that will give me pushback on this, but I believe that most of the companies that are developing these are being very responsible about it. People shouldn't assume that any car that's for sale right now can drive itself, because it can't. That's very important for the average consumer to know. And that people should really be paying attention to what regulators are and aren't doing. At the same time, support the technology, but at the same time, support its safe deployment on public roads.
We absolutely need the safe deployment. And as Russ said, you cannot buy a self-driving car today, despite what you might read or what you've been told. You cannot buy a self-driving car from a dealership today. You cannot buy it online. Russ, we're a few days away from 2022. I wish you a happy and healthy 2022, and may you continue to write really great, thought-provoking columns and keep covering the industry and keep hammering that safety drum, because you're doing a wonderful job there.
Well, thanks, Grayson, and Happy New Year to you. And may you continue to do great work on this podcast, which is always awesome, with great guests and great questions. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Because the future's bright, the future's autonomous, and the future is public trust and transparency. Russ, thank you so much for coming on the Road to Autonomy today.
Anytime.
Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.